just to, before we move on into the next section, in preparation for this webinar, we got quite a few different questions and emails through, particularly around ULAs and some of the misconceptions around ULAs. And we identified 3 kind of key myths that keep coming up whenever people talk about ULA. So we're going to go through each one of those. And the first one of those is the myth that ULAs are easy to get out of. Mark Smith, could you start us off with this one?
Thanks, Dan. Yeah. So in theory, getting out of a ULA is fairly simple. It's a process called certification. So what you do is you declare or certify to Oracle what software you've used from your ULA and the volumes, and you get that signed by a C-level exec, and then you submit that to Oracle and the job's done. So simple. But in reality, obviously, Oracle could challenge that. There is no process which says Oracle has to agree your certification. You can certify and you're out. However, obviously the Oracle sales reps are going to get wind of this certification and knock on the door and say, well, it's not really as simple as just telling me how many licenses you've used, because we need to go through all of the deployments and we need to understand how they're deployed, where they're deployed. And it's a really complex process. So Oracle will see fear in that and start to mention things like audits, and because obviously then that's an opportunity for the Oracle sales guy to sell you another ULA, but to extend the first one. So, be careful about how you go through this process. And really, it's not just about counting how many licenses you have. The real gotchas are in and around the contract term. Because, and they go back 15, 20 years, some of them, because what Oracle does is it has a contract term for the ULA with a number of clauses, and then those contracts refer to web pages, and they've got different clauses on, and you need to understand that whole thing. And I've been in this business for over 20 years, and I wouldn't do it myself. I would get an expert in who's lived and breathed these things, because what your Oracle contract says now, and you look at the one ULA, it's probably not the same as the ULA you signed 3 years ago, because the terms will have changed. Oracle constantly improves its contract terms in its own benefit. So you need to understand that whole complexity. And then when you do get ready to certify out, having consulted experts and got people in to help you with that, then you are completely in control of everything. But it's not as simple as just counting the number of licenses and sending them off to Oracle. Even if Oracle do offer to help in this process as well, because this was an old trick that Oracle used for many, many years. They would say, well, let's help make sure that you're making the most of your licenses. And they would approach it in that way and suggest that they would come and help you. And of course, what they really used to do was what Oracle called optimize the licenses. And they would use that term, let's help you optimize your licenses. But optimizing licenses in your mind is not the same as it is in Oracle's mind. In Oracle's mind, that means sell more. So what they're coming in to do is they're going to audit you, and they're going to say it starts off as an optimized process, and then they come in with the audit team, and then they find some non-compliance, and then guess what? One of the ways out of the non-compliance is to buy another ULA. So if you let yourself be on the back foot in that relationship, that's probably what's going to happen. So the thing to do is make a decision to get out of it, plan effectively, plan a date in the future when you're going to do that, and then make sure you get some expert advice to understand exactly how to do that. And as long as you're in control of that, then at the end of that, you simply certify out. And it can be that simple, but you're going to have to take some time, and you're going to have to get some help on that. So, Mark, have you seen this sort of thing in the past?
Exactly. I'd take your point, and you can't stress it enough to say you need to take your time about getting out of a ULA. This is not something you do in the last 30 days or even the last 90 days. You've got a lot of homework to do to evaluate your estate and your license position. So you need software asset management people involved, and I'm sure tools. You need people with good contractual understanding of ULAs. So what are you contracted for? What are you committed to do? Are you still compliant to that? Make sure you haven't done anything you shouldn't have done over the years. And then you also need to, with the IT folks, to be talking about, okay, what are we going to be doing with Oracle going forward? What is the kind of Oracle relationship we want? What is the kind of Oracle estate we want when we get out of a ULA? Because the ULA may have been a good tool for you historically, but probably or possibly it's not a good tool going forward. So you need all of the people from asset management, from procurement, from contractual knowledge of Oracle ULAs, from IT, potentially from finance, because there's a financial element incorporated here, all involved in this process over a long period of time, so you get it right. And you can do it right. You get the right people involved, whether you got those skills internally or, as Mark says, you bring them from external places. You can do this right. You can accredit out of a ULA and do it in a nice, simplified, calm manner that is financially attractive to you. So you can get out. So you can do it. But remember, as Mark said at the beginning of this, actually, this is not what Oracle wants you to do. Oracle loves ULAs, and they love rolling ULAs, and they want you to roll. So their effort will be into continuing the ULA and growing the ULA, not in accrediting you out. Now, of course, if you tell them and you bang the drum enough, they get the message that, okay, you're coming out of this. And as Mark says, it's highly likely they will offer to put in their optimizing team, as Mark nicely calls them. It's usually kind of like the audit guys by another name. They're looking, they want to get under the covers with this. They want to see whether you're compliant. They want to encourage you to, deploy more licenses or to come out of the ULA at a higher watermark than you would like to. So, they've got a kind of second mission here. It's not just to help you optimize from the general sense, but also optimize it for Oracle going forward. So I would always advise, Forrester would always advise that, if you're going to get anyone external in to help you prepare to get out of a ULA, then get an independent party who understands Oracle licensing, asset management, licensing rules and contractual complexities. They're the best people to help you get out of this, because they'll give you just a clean, independent view that gives you direction here that you can follow. If you're letting Oracle do that for you, well, then whatever you end up with, you're kind of asking for that. So as Mark says, take a lot of time, prepare well, do it right. You can get out cleanly, but if you need to take independent advice, then grab it, but make sure it's independent advice.
A really interesting point there around that independent advice, Mark. But do you have any kind of best practice about how to engage those people? When they come in, what's the best way of operating?
There's a key thing here around the word independent. Obviously, Oracle isn't independent. It goes without saying. But when you look at third parties out there, asset management companies, whatever they may want to call themselves, you've got a spectrum. You've got some people who are hand in glove with Oracle, perhaps are resellers of Oracle products as well as doing asset management, and have a vested interest in obviously trying to sell you Oracle stuff as well, because they're paid commission by Oracle to do that. That's their job. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you'll have people in that independent space, let's call it that, who are truly independent, who have no vested interest in trying to sell you Oracle products or services. And from my perspective, I would always advise, if you're looking for someone external, it has to be independent, and get as independent an organization as you possibly can. So you're looking for an organization that has no vested interest in trying to sell you products or services of Oracle's. So some of the asset management tools, accredited by Oracle, they are kind of closer to Oracle because they're accredited and they're kind of trying to help Oracle. So you just there's a spectrum. So you just need to look down the spectrum to somebody who's truly independent. And I'd just ask the question, if you're trying to evaluate independent advisor to get you through this accreditation period, just say to them, hey, look, are you truly independent of Oracle? Are you connected in any way, legally or whatever, to Oracle in terms of being a reseller for them, or trying to promote their products or services, or getting any sort of remuneration for doing that? And it's a question to ask right up front. And clearly, if they're in that sort of middle camp, now you might still like them. That's fine if you want to pursue that route. But if you want true independence, you need to find somebody who has no vested interest in Oracle selling you more product or service.
Thanks, Mark. And on that point, we were an Oracle partner, for about just over 20 years. So we have a really deep understanding of how things work. And, we terminated that partnership something like 18 months ago now, because we needed to be independent. We didn't want to have to toe any company line for Oracle. So we made the decision for the benefit of our customers to cut that partnership. But, those 20 years have really meant that we understand a lot about how this works, a lot about how Oracle works, and we can use that to help our customers get the best deal for them. Really.